Tell me about the spacing, your trademark.
Well, the spacing was really influenced by my first Domaine Romani Conti experience.
Ah,
And after tasting the DRC, I really started researching why the French were planting their vineyards in this manner and we weren't in California. And it really came down to just a mechanization standpoint. The French were doing everything by hand, and then they started implementing mechanization with horses back in when the vines were being torn out in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And in America, we had prohibition basically removed the majority of our vineyards. People became orchard farmers, bought tractors to farm their orchards, and when they went back to planting vineyards, they fit their vineyard to their orchard tractor. They're the California Sprawl 12-foot by 8-foot spacing with a high cross arm to fit the tractor tires underneath, etc. So we kind of went backwards or narrow from 12 feet, and they went wider to accommodate a horse to a meter. And I personally felt that there was probably a very significant wine style difference from having the density of plantation, what the root system's interaction with the other vines, as well as just the vertical shoot positioning was really invented for the purpose of high density plantings. And you're seeing a lot of people on 8-foot plantings putting cross arms and kind of getting more protection from the direct sunlight on the fruit, and that's something that the spacing definitely gives us, is less direct sunlight on the fruit, ripening through the use of photosynthesis and the canopy, and giving you a very dramatically different wine style than what I would call California typical.
when one looks at the yields for the densely planted, vineyards in Europe, they talk about 7,000 vines per hectare, 8,000, 9,000. Do you know what the equivalent would be in hectare for one of
Yeah.
your vineyards?
So if kind of in the Grand Cru region of Burgundy, I believe it's around 10,000 vines per hectare is kind of the norm, with varying spacings. This is about 3,600 vines per acre, which 4,000 vines per acre is 10,000 vines per hectare. So we're just under that, with leaving it 4 feet rather than a meter. That's kind of the difference. You're about 330 vines less per hectare, or per acre, which is about 600 vines per hectare, 700 vines per hectare less. And as far as yield was kind of, I think, part of that question, what we notice is we're getting smaller berries and smaller clusters on higher density. So it takes more clusters to make a pound of fruit. We're averaging anywhere from 1 pound to 3 pounds per vine, which is pretty similar to Burgundy's yield. So hectoliters per hectare are pretty much identical. It's really based on the number of shoots you have per meter or per acre or per hectare, leaving no more than 2 clusters and often 1 cluster per shoot. This site is one of the lowest yielding sites, where we often get less than a pound per vine. And the average, I would say, is about 2¼ to 2½ pounds per vine throughout the majority of our vineyards. And that yield will give you anywhere between 4½ and 5½ tons to the acre. But still, what's important with Pinot Noir is to understand pounds per vine. Having a low pounds per vine is really the wine quality deciding factor. And I believe that in Burgundy, talking about yields per hectare mean a lot, because there's already an implied spacing understanding, approximately 10,000 vines per hectare. So when you talk in tons per acre, it translates to something. In California, we have everything from 12 by 8 spacing to meter by meter spacing. So without understanding the spacing, yields per acre really mean nothing. You could have a 12 by 8 space vineyard and get 3 tons to the acre and say it's low yield.
Yeah.
Well, on a pounds per vine basis, that's darn near 30 pounds per plant.
Yeah.
So versus 3. So really, where does wine quality come in? And that's a balanced vine carrying a balanced amount of fruit for the growth that it has, and given the proper spacing for the vine to grow enough, produce enough fruit, but nothing's really out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And if you achieve that, you're going to achieve highest wine quality. If I can do that with a physically small plant and carry less pounds per vine, I feel that I'm impacting wine quality in a positive way by doing that. So,
What kinds of obstacles did you find in trying to adapt the Burgundian spacing to this region?
the biggest obstacle was equipment, really. I mean, just the mechanization of it. You know, in Europe it was everywhere, but which piece was going to be the most serviceable for my vineyards that are kind of scattered throughout the coastal hills of Sonoma County, many of them being 1 acre, 3 acres. So it needed to be a small piece of equipment, but that was efficient, that could handle slopes and cross slopes and so forth. So we originally went between the row with a little Italian crawler. That was extremely inserviceable. Much of the time it would not be working. When it worked, it was great. Then we found the over-the-road tractor that was very lightweight, the Caval tractor, and that really changed the game for us and made us very mechanizable. Anything anybody's doing on 8-foot spacing, I can do on a 4-foot spacing, including machine harvesting if we ever needed to go that route. And with that, you know, it's just strictly a philosophical decision then. There still are challenges having your tractor come from France, and you know, how do you source this, and you're often having to change what they use to something that's more available in the US and that sort of thing. So it's not like owning a Kubota or a John Deere that you just go to the dealer and everything's available within, you know, a few days. But it's very workable at this point, and I wouldn't, you know, I never considered that I should have changed. If anything, I'm thinking, why didn't I go to a meter and get another 15 or 20%
Interesting.
more vines per acre?
Right.
But you know, this spacing is good, and one thing that having the 4-foot tractor row allows us to have a 48-inch canopy. And one of the things I had noticed about California Pinot Noir is often the acids tend to drop out of the wine as the sugars escalate, and by keeping a taller canopy, you actually retain acid more. So if you were to have a meter wide spacing, you couldn't have any more than a meter of canopy, and with a 4-foot spacing I can get a 48-inch canopy, so I have almost a foot more of leaf surface helping retain the natural acidity. And we really want to produce a wine that is sub 14% alcohol, that we don't have to water back or add acid or do any of those things, as naturally expressing the vineyard as we possibly can. And you'll hear me talk mostly about farming and how we achieve that rather than the winery and how we achieve that. And that's because I do farm everything that we make wine from, so that's my focus, and I don't think we really need much winemaking in the process, just guiding it, directing it, and making our oak decisions, you know, how much new oak and what coopers and when to bottle, and you know, what fits in the blend and what should we sell out in bulk. Those are the tough decisions in the winery we're facing, but you know, not too much else. So.
In reading the website, it looked as though you have to sort of select your sites too as to where you could do low vigor types of farming.
Yeah, that's. I think that's probably, you know, it's the foundation to every great wine is the vineyard, and this philosophy is not right for every vineyard. But then I would also propose that if this spacing would not work on a site, that site should probably grow corn or tomatoes or something else. It should grow food crops rather than wine, because it's not going to produce the best wine. So But if you are going to put a vineyard on a site, you definitely have to make sure that the spacing matches the rootstock, matches the root depth and the root volume and the water holding capacity of the soil, so that you can balance the vigor of the vine to the spacing. And I would propose that it's not right for every site. Generally they're leaner soils, they're slight hillside or plateau vineyards and they have well-drained characteristics to the soil. So all of those things are fairly important to be successful. With the way we do our soils work now, we have a very good understanding of what the potential of the site is prior to planting, and we pick the spacing and the rootstock and so forth based from that PhD level soil science. And I've definitely turned down several jobs that I said, look, I'm not the right fit for your site, and you should talk to someone else that would have you be more successful doing a different kind of program. But that's not the kind of farming I'm interested in. So
I know that in your own winemaking, you've specialized in the Burgundian varieties, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. As far as trying this planting system on other types of varieties, have you done much of that?
Some Cabernet Sauvignon and some Syrah. I would say both of those efforts produce a dramatically different style of wine than what you're seeing in California Typic. In Syrah's case, a much more elegant, lighter style of Syrah, and more pretty and elegant, not powerful and bold, which seems to be the style that the successful Syrah producers in California are going for. Same with Cabernet, much more Bordeaux style varietal characteristic, not this kind of powerful fruit driven wine. So personally that's where my palate leans. But it depends, I think, on every producer. And being that my focus is Pinot and Chardonnay, and I'm in the Russian River Valley, that's really what we're most of our experiences with, and the direction that we're focusing on. 85–90% of our vines are Pinot or Chardonnay, and I really think that that's my focus, and that's the direction. Unless 15–16% alcohol cabs from Napa are going to phase out, and something else some other style is going to take their place.
That'd be nice.
You probably won't see a whole lot of it. So it's
Sure.
But Napa actually does have quite a bit of a lot more high density than Sonoma County does. With the Mondavi Carneros project on Pinot, and then you've got the Opus One, and you've got Rudd's plantings that are all 4x4, and quite a few Chateau Boswell's vineyards are fairly high density, and there's a host more as well. With running out of land there, they've gone narrower. So, but more like 5 feet and 6 feet, I think, is typical. 4 feet is still kind of not the norm. So.